All right, folks. Thanks for coming out and meeting up with us on our second edition of Come Cloud with Us. My name is Chris Gill. I have with me Abdul Kazi. We're both, in the IT arena for different cloud aspects of our journey. Today we're bringing Dwayne Natwick with us to have this kind of discussion back and forth, a little mini presentation, but we're happy to have you join us, Dwayne. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. For those of you who don't know me, Dwayne Natwick, aka Captain Hyperscaler on the websites and everything. I'm Microsoft Azure MVP now 3 times over. Also a MCT regional lead. Got both of those plaques sitting out here. Just got my MCT plaque, my regional lead plaque for finally when I got back from a trip I was on last week. So excited to get that. I'm starting. I actually have been a product manager for a multi-cloud service provider here for the last 9 months. Prior to that, I was a tech lead for training organization for Microsoft. But I'll be starting a new role on August 1st, actually, as a principal cloud security tech lead. So I'll be leading our with a global GSI. So which is a company I'm with. I'm actually going to the parent company and going to be kind of the CTO for our cloud security. So I'll be leading the charge, leading all the advocacy for our teams for cloud security across all of our family and with our partners. One of those being Microsoft, or definitely a big Microsoft partner, as well as AWS and Google. So really excited about that, because my focus will be solely on cloud security, which is what I enjoy talking about and what I talk about in most of my talks here at user groups and things like that, is always around security. So I get to do it as my day job too.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations on many fronts. Really great job.
Thanks.
Great job.
So I want to ask you about this. And I always wanted to kind of find out, how did the name Captain Hyperscaler come about?
That's an interesting story. I didn't come up with it on my own, actually. It's not a real nickname unless somebody gives it to you, right? So I was with a company, Secure 24, which was a subsidiary of NTT, a couple years ago, before I got on with the Microsoft training company. And we were a multi-cloud company as well. And I was the product manager for all of our cloud services. And one of the salespeople just one day said, it just called me Captain Hyperscaler. So I'm like, hey, I was just about to start launching a blog site, and I'm like, I'm going to use that. That's going to be, I'm going to register that domain, and that is going to be my name online.
That's awesome, man. Yeah.
So it just kind of stuck. I thought that was kind of cool, like Chris, I'm a Marvel fan. So it was kind of cool. I made a kind of cool, logo of a superhero. So holding a cloud. So I thought that was, it's just something to geek out on and use, and kind of give me a brand at that point, and just kind of kept that since.
No, that's interesting, because the thing is, regardless of what hyperscaler you're working on, you're always going to be the hyperscaler, right? Because a lot of folks I see, if they're doing Azure, they would have something in their blog, Azure or AWS or GCP or what have you. But yeah, with your hyperscaler,
I can dance around them and give everybody some love, which I've been trying to do a little bit more of lately, because of our strength in AWS and GCP. So I've been trying to learn more around, focusing a lot right now on AWS, hoping to get the AWS security here in the next couple weeks, and get some AWS certs, and then get a couple Google certs. Spread it around. It's not, my certificate wall is a little bit heavy Microsoft.
Yeah, I need to balance that out. Right?
It's never going to balance out. I guarantee that. I'm not going to do that. especially because the other
you
two
need
guys
one of those,
take the test every 3 years.
right. I was gonna say you just need one of those ones that like spins. As it turns, it keeps like turning. It's like, here's my GCP. Here's my
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Need to have a need. Change the shirt every so often.
It's like, who am I talking to today?
Like they used to do with like the Indy 500, where they had the guy changing the winner's hat like every 30 seconds.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So I got to poke on one other thing, Dwayne. I know you mentioned security is your forte, and I'm looking. I know you got a lot of like hidden books and stuff all over the place. So what's going on there?
Oh, my books. Oh yeah. So I have authored 2 books. So I got the fundamentals.
Oh, awesome.
And the identity and access, the SC300, and I'm currently working on the SC100, the cybersecurity architect. About a quarter of a way through that one. That I think we're targeted for end of year getting that one out. I think so. I've worked with Pact through those. I'm also working on a couple security ebooks with them as well. So
fantastic. Yeah, I definitely, the identity and access administrator one is kudos. Well done. Well done.
Thanks. But yeah, it's been fun. My wife asked me, why am I writing another book? I'm like, well, so I've done a fundamentals, I've done an associate, I have to do an expert, I have to complete the set, right? That's the whole that's the certification track. I have to. My OCD wouldn't allow me to stop.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that one. That's going to be a good one. So yeah, that's the 100.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying writing that one. It's a lot different than, each one of them is a little bit different, right? Because the fundamentals, you're taking a very high level, and you're trying to give everybody enough to get them interested and enough to learn the content, but you can't get too deep because it is a fundamentals exam. You don't want to go way over their head and lose them. So you got to you got to know when to back off. And I actually, like, with some of the technical reviewers, when I was going through it, they would tell me, you need to go a little bit deeper. And I'm like, it's a fundamentals exam. It's a fundamentals book. I can't go that deep. I would love to, but this book would be 800 pages long, and then the associate, obviously you got to get a lot more hands-on. It's a lot, doing, building the exercises and things like that, which was really easy for me because I built labs and things like that when I was working with a learning provider. We would build labs for workshops and things like that. So that came really easy. With this one, it's it's design, it's theory, it's evaluate, and all of those things. And what I've got to come out with that is really how to kind of then build kind of like a whiteboard design kind of case study out of each of the sections of the exam, so that somebody can kind of put into practice what I'm talking about as well. So it's a little bit different from that, because it's theoretical. Then you're really more whiteboarding and building a case study rather than jumping into the portal definitively and building anything. It's looking at the portal and looking at how I'm interpreting, or how I'm helping an analyst to understand how Defender can help you, help research and alert. Those are the kind of things on this one that's kind of a little bit different.
Yeah, and on that topic, we'll let you get started with your presentation and actually, the topic is security, so that kind of matches what you will be talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I'll share, if I don't mind. I'll share screen here. You can pop my screen up there, Chris.
Okay, yeah, let's swap you around. We're going to do this, and we're going to drop ourselves.
There we go. Yeah. So, and I noticed I had a typo on visiting, so my apologies for my typo on my. So yeah. So around cloud security, as we talk about Microsoft and we talk about all of the capabilities around Microsoft's cloud, something that I always kind of feel that is missing a little bit in terms of of the discussion and even the positioning around the security services that Microsoft 365 has. As I've learned more and more around the capabilities that you get with just Microsoft 365 licensing. One of the things back, even 13, 14 years ago when I was getting my CISSP and dealing and working with kind of that CISO kind of area of things is risk analysis and risk assessments and understanding where your risks are and your vulnerabilities. And Microsoft talks a lot about vulnerabilities and threats and things around and how you're going to respond to them and how you're going to build a strong security posture. But something that none of the cloud providers really discuss, what I think enough, is a true risk analysis. And that's kind of where kind of I was thinking, where the topic came about. And I'm not going to go back through introduce myself since we already talked about it, but the key things around some of this, I'm not going to spend like a ton of time going through slides for everybody, but keep things to keep in mind is we have risks. We have risks, we have threats. Everybody knows that if you're in cloud security or you're building any kind of cloud infrastructure. But what is the risk to that asset when an attack takes place? And that's really what the analysis is of it. Inventorying everything that you have in your environment, and then determining the likelihood that it's going to be exploited, and then what the cost is going to be if it is exploited. And a lot of the things around those costs are not just financial losses, if somebody gets a hold of your balance sheet or gets a hold of somebody's credit card information, but it's reputational as well. And what I really am strong about is that in terms of your risk analysis, and when you feel that you're going to accept a risk, and you're going to say, okay, the cost and the likelihood of it happening is rather low, so I'm not going to put this control in place. Why are we not looking at this a little bit stronger? And you can see here, if you look at this decision matrix of whether it's a minor possibility of it happen to a major outage. Think about year and a half ago when the Southeastern Pipeline had a ransomware attack. It knocked down the fuel pipeline for a few days, but reputationally, what happened was they had to explain themselves to as to what happened, and what truly happened was they had two administrators that had left the company, and they didn't use a strong password. Their accounts were still live, and multi-factor authentication wasn't turned on. So how easy and the key thing here to think about is how easy would it have been just to turn multi-factor authentication on, or use something like privileged identity management and only giving them administrative rights when they needed them, so that way it decreased their risk exposure. And with companies that don't reevaluate and do a risk analysis on a regular basis, they really don't know what controls they might already have in place that they just need to turn on. And one of the key things that I always think about when I'm doing, especially a Microsoft 365 based security class, is there are so many security capabilities that you get within Microsoft 365 that really you're already paying for the licensing anyway. So when you think about the equation here of the asset, the cost of the asset, the potential for the vulnerability, and the threat of that risk, and then having that loss expectancy versus the cost of the loss, and then balancing this equation for threat modeling here of what the annual loss you're going to calculate that annual loss expectancy by how much it's going to cost you. So, and what the rate of that occurrence happening. So if you think about it costing, if you have a risk occurrence that's going to cost you $100,000, and the rate that is going to occur is possibly twice a year. So that's 200. So you're looking at potential $200,000 that is going to cost you as your annualized loss expectancy. And so then you're going to say, okay, is it worth it to pay $200,000 a year for a control? Or am I going to accept this $200,000 loss? But again, if the loss is great enough that it is going to also cause you reputational damage and loss of customers, there might be even more loss that's going to take place that you got to account for, not just financial loss that you're going to have, with systems being down or something like that. So when you think about it and think about what's important to review, you got to look at what the cost of controls are. And many of the controls, maybe when you were thinking 10, 15 years ago, when you were starting to build your company or your finance or your infrastructure, and you started to migrate to cloud infrastructures, we've got a lot newer controls out there that are much more accessible. And with that is Microsoft 365, and look at what Microsoft has for that overall threat detection, threat analysis, threat hunting, and vulnerability protection across the board with the Defender products and Microsoft Sentinel. And when you look at these, and Defender for Cloud is its own product area, and Sentinel is its own product area. But this 365 Defender package and everything that you get in Microsoft 365 Defender, if you're an enterprise organization that's getting Microsoft 365 enterprise licenses, you should be investing in E5 licenses. I feel you should just start there. And because you get all of these pieces to the puzzle at really a nominal delta charge. You just build it into your budget. It's part of your user costs, and you utilize that. And that builds upon your ability then and your controls for continuing to address the various risks that might be in your risk inventory. And to give an idea here, if you're thinking about a business premium license is $22. They're putting more security in these business premium licenses, which are for companies that are up to 300 licenses. Microsoft Enterprise E3 kind of falls in between here, and I think that's $35 of a user per month. But you get everything with Microsoft 365 E5. You get the capabilities of all of Microsoft 365 Defender. You get Intune, you get information protection, threat protection, all the conditional access with all the identity protection for your Azure Active Directory. You get multi-factor authentication for everybody. You get advanced compliance capabilities. All of those things you get, in Microsoft 365 Defender, even if you're not using Azure, has capabilities similar to utilizing Microsoft Sentinel within the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. You can do hunting queries with Custo language and Custo query language, and all of the very similar things that you can do, not to the depth and breadth that you can in Microsoft Sentinel with third-party security vendors and security software, but you can do it all. If you're a Microsoft 365 company, you can protect your endpoints and protect all of your devices, all of your applications with Microsoft 365 Enterprise E5. And for an example of this, I pulled up like Trend Micro, which is a popular software. Now they bill per year rather than per month, so it's a little bit different. But if you think about Trend Micro and what Trend Micro's security packages have, if you buy the highest level, you're getting really Microsoft Defender for endpoint. You're getting what you get with that Exchange Online protection and advanced threat protection capabilities in Trend Micro. You have that built in with an E5 license. What you don't get with Trend is you don't get Intune. So you're gonna have to purchase something such as buying Microsoft Intune Endpoint Manager on its own, buying something like AirWatch, buying something like IBM MDM capabilities, again, which is another cost. So you keep ticking and adding these costs when, if you're a Microsoft 365 user, you've got a lot of this at your disposal, and they continue, and it just adds benefits, and you increase your total cost of ownership capabilities that you have with Microsoft 365. And like I said, you can, with a minimum delta really from E3 to E5, and E3 has a good portion of these on their own anyway. But if you're a company over 300 users, that you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on users per month anyway. What's a little bit more to have more control over your risks, and that's really the balancing act and what you need to think about. And what you need to think about is, do you want to pay all these additional vendors, then these software companies, for a control here and a control there, when you have it all within Microsoft 365. So, those are some things that, as I go through and I do, a lot of talks on, identity protection or data protection or Microsoft Defender and all of these areas. That's the thing that keeps coming back to me is why are companies not looking stronger, taking a deeper look at the risk analysis that they might have done years ago and bought some of these softwares. It's kind of, if anybody watches any television, you see all of these apps, these new apps on how to manage all of your subscriptions to all of your streaming services and things like that. It's kind of the same kind of concept for a company, that you need to go back and look at all of the third-party vendors and all the controls that you have today, what you're paying for them today, and what you might already have in a Microsoft 365 suite that you're already utilizing. And that's really from a risk assessment and risk analysis piece, what you should think about, and the capability that Microsoft provides. And something that I'm believe really strongly about is Microsoft, regardless of whether you're using maybe AWS or you're using Google for your infrastructure, there's no platform for your business productivity and collaboration that rivals what Microsoft 365 does, and what Microsoft 365 capabilities have for attack surface reduction on your endpoint devices, and protection across, on shadow IT, and with Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, and and your protection really that's built into to your Azure Active Directory, or Microsoft Entra as it's called today, and Microsoft Purview for governance, and all those capabilities that are really at your fingertips if you are utilizing Microsoft 365, which the majority of enterprises out there are already using. So like I said, I wasn't going to go through and spend like a ton of time. I didn't want, I wanted to kind of keep it open. What we can do is Chris and Abdul, if we want to, have a little bit of a discussion about this, and get your, I'd love to hear your thoughts around it, being around the Microsoft ecosystem as well. But the key thing around, your risk assessment and understanding what you have. And that's really, I think, where a lot of people go wrong is they forget what they have and need to understand, and kind of revisit and reevaluate every so often what you're investing in and what you have out there, and find ways to decrease your risk without any additional investment, which is really, I think, what Microsoft has done a really good job of building as they've built up what used to be Office 365, which was just a suite of Word and Excel and PowerPoint, to putting Teams in there and putting collaboration, and then building all of this governance and security all around it. It really becomes a really powerful tool to decrease risk within your organization.
No, absolutely, that makes sense. And from an Office 365, I already saw the challenge. People get confused because with the offering, there's so many things, and like, what am I getting? And they don't even turn on. So, for example, when I was doing landing ground review for two of my enterprise customers, they didn't have MFA enabled for a lot of their customers. I'm like, you guys already have this P2, it's already there. They're like, oh, we have this, okay. So they don't even know what they're buying these days, and I think that's the challenge with a lot of these things.
Yeah, it's like oh, I've got Office Suite and I've got Teams.
Exactly, right.
As I'm going through this, I'm trying not to sound like a commercial for Microsoft, but it's hard not to, because when you're like, and that's like just one of those best kept secrets out there is what Microsoft 360 has, and I think there's probably not enough people out there that are actually selling it that understand it either. It's some there's been there's always been a joke out there, right, that to do Microsoft licensing you have to have a PhD, right? So it's something like, it probably has a lot to do with that, but if you break it down to the fact that you're an enterprise buying enterprise licensing, you've got a ton of security controls in there. And if you're thinking about it, coming at it that way, rather than coming at it with, boy, this is expensive for Word and PowerPoint and Teams and Outlook, then it becomes something that's really that becomes really powerful and important to you, unlike just your Office suite. And which is where it's evolved, so like 15 years ago it was like, oh, I don't want to have Office on my desktop anymore, I'm going to get Office 365. That was where it was born out of, right? But Microsoft has just continuously built all of this great security and governance features on top of it, or underpinning all of those business capabilities that people I think just don't, like you said, they don't think about it. They got it for Teams and everything like that, but it's got a wealth of stuff, and they've even done more. Like I was saying with Business Premium, it was last year at Ignite, they were announcing the additional security capabilities within just the business suite of Microsoft 365. So, it still doesn't rival what E5 has, but it actually, I've compared it to E3, and it's very close to the E3 capabilities. So you're getting like, the enterprise level capabilities in a business, platform as well. So just getting those things, getting those all in there. And I said, if anybody that hasn't visited, their risk assessment, and hopefully they've done one previously, that they should look at it again if they're utilizing Microsoft 365 capability, and that's in their ecosystem, because there's probably some risks that they accepted back then that they can now mitigate instead, and as well as you could probably find some softwares that you could probably terminate the subscriptions for and save some money as well.
No, exactly. And I think the main focus is coming from the 0 day, right? Like Microsoft is really focused, and a lot of the other vendors are mainly also focused on 0 day. So I think, to your point, even the business premiums are focused on security now. I did want to ask a question about security. We're talking about security, and with Microsoft, it does has a lot of offerings. So what is your take on the conditional access? Are you seeing that being used quite a bit? And talk about the advantages of that, because I know people don't talk about that. Majority times we only talk about MFA and passwordless, but I think conditional access is something that doesn't get the hour it should receive. So, yeah.
I've even with my own company, I have a love-hate relationship with how they implement MFA as well. MFA can be easy. It can be easy and it can be seamless and comfortable, or it can be made really hard. And um, and unfortunately, some companies make it hard rather than using push capabilities and things like that, where you got to where if you've got multiple steps that you got to go on, touch on your phone and then enter a code and things like that. That's what makes MFA adoption. That's where the user environment gets really mad at you and gets really annoyed. I use my wife as an example. She works for a school system. They put multi-factor authentication on her attendance app, and she says it takes her like 5 minutes every day to log in because she has to bounce between Gmail and to get the code, and then the code they must have like a really low parameter on the code expiring on the email, so she's got to go into email, and then then the code expires, so she's got to initiate it again, and that is not the way to do MFA. It's you use an app on your phone that pushes a notification. You use most people use Face ID on their phone anyway. Face ID to open it, and click OK. That is the easiest way to implement it. I thought my company was coming around because I had to put a code in. I had to go to an app and put my code in, and then I saw that they're using Face ID. I'm like, and for better security, I'm like, oh great, they're doing push notifications. No, I've got to still go into the app, use my tap, and use my Face ID to visualize the code. And then I still have to enter the code in. I'm like, that's not the right way to do MFA. Mm-hmm. And so back to your question on conditional access, I haven't seen enough companies probably using conditional access. But again, that's another way to make it easier on the user environment. If you build conditional access policies properly to recognize potential risk on users and things like that, where maybe you don't need MFA as much. You do some, you put session parameters on there so that it, that if they're on the same IP address, like I'm in my home office most of the time, that I'm not given the need for MFA because I'm on the same IP address I was on yesterday. So obviously I'm in the same place. But if I, like last week I was in New York and Boston, then that conditional access would trigger and make me re-verify myself, and I have no problem with that, and I don't think any user would. It's really, again, a powerful tool to make it easier on the user environment, plus give a high level of security. Privileged identity management's another one as well. Why does everybody need administrative rights all the time? There's
standing access, yeah.
Reason for that, and all you're doing is increasing your attack surface if they get compromised. So those are all things that I think companies are maybe using a little bit more. I haven't seen it enough to for it to be something that I can say is a widespread way to go everybody at. So but slowly but surely, it took 5 years for everybody to kind of accept and adopt MFA. Really,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring because just harping and sharing a little story on MFA from my experience too. It's interesting that, and maybe you both see this too in your paths, where I feel like a lot of folks are talking about it. And there's a lot of talk, a lot of discussion, a lot of decision making, but then there's never, like, some of it doesn't get done, or it's like, well, that might be too hard or whatever else. And I know I kind of recently went through that where we had guest access to a part of our environment, and a couple hundred users coming in, whatever else. We went through the conditional access. We enforced, MFA for folks that were coming in. We actually went and used the terms of use as well as part of it. It took, I don't know how many months to talk and design and chat it up and make sure that, all the T's were crossed and I's dotted. And it took 17 to 20 minutes to implement. and test out and make sure that it worked, right? I mean, so I'd be curious, are you both seeing that same trend too? Or?
That's I mean, I think that's probably where a lot of these implementations fail, is in lack of communication with the environment, the people that it's going to impact. If you explain, we're all reasonable people, and we're professionals. If we explain why this is going to, and how this is going to affect you, and why it's important, and you don't want your identity stolen, so somebody gets your credit card numbers and all of those possible things that are going to happen because you use your kid's name as your password, or
dog.
Right, or dog, or you have a strong password and you put a Post-it note of it on your monitor, right?
Oh, you're not supposed to do that?
Right, exactly. Right.
Oh no, that's my to-do list. But
all of those things, and that I think that's where it all fails. And I always start a lot of my talks when I'm talking about anything that has to do with security by saying, it's planning, it's communicating, that ultimately is the most important aspect of anything that you implement. And if you don't properly plan, and you don't have a proper communication path for the change management of it all, it's going to be hard for them to adopt. And I was doing a partner guide at my previous company, and I was interviewing a bunch of Microsoft partners, and one of the key, and we were talking about remote. It was for remote user security, essentially, and every one of them they were a big bunch of companies that were big in doing virtual desktop implementations and everything like that. And they said, and the biggest part of what they had built was their change management team, and their change management working with the user environment was what they felt was the most important aspect of their deployment, was working with those users, making sure that they were comfortable in adopting this new new remote desktop, remote user type environment.
No, that's fair, actually. So what I've been noticing is when the MFA came early, and I've seen this, depending on the industry, some companies are still livid asking people to change password every 90 days. I'm like, you have the MFA. So that becomes more hindrance for the adoption of MFA. But the industry, right? Because legal, financial, those kind of requirements. So yeah.
Yeah, right. It's written into like PCI DSS and HIPAA
exactly,
and all that.
right?
Exactly. If you get audited, you have to prove that you have that in your policies, right?
Like how many slide audits did we get this week?
Not for action security. So I thought that was pretty interesting, because people get annoyed. Like, think about it. If you have to change that for every 45 days, and you cannot even keep your previous passwords and whatnot, and then MFA, that's annoying. So yeah, that's why a lot of people start using password managers, because nobody should be remembering passwords. So I think that's one of the adoptions I've seen, not on enterprise, but even on a consumer level now. A lot of people are using.
I'm passwordless on my Outlook account, my personal Outlook account.
Yeah, me too. So yeah,
I don't have to change my password.
Exactly, right. So yeah, we should be doing that. So I think MFA is definitely the future, and passwordless is the future.
Oh yeah, my point is if anybody wanted to try and unlock my my Microsoft services, or get onto my Microsoft account, they need my phone and they need my face 3 times, I think, right? Because I need you got to unlock my phone with my Face ID, then you got to unlock the authenticator app with my Face ID, and then you hit OK, and it reads my face again. It reads my face 3 times. And it's painless to me.
Yeah, right. That's why I always, I think
Unless
there's
you've
a
got a
second
problem with
section.
retinal scans or anything like that, right? Yeah.
It's like the keys, right? You know,
Oh, the
but it's
FIDO
the same deal. It's like FIDO
FIDO.
keys are phenomenal. You know, if you can get orgs to go that route, man, giddy up. You
That's the
know,
problem.
there's
I had a guy that was I was teaching the MS 500 class, and I had a guy who did military work.
Mm.
And he really threw a wrench in the ointment when I was talking about passwordless and MFA and facial recognition and FIDO keys and all of that, because they're like, yeah, I can't take my phone in and
Oh, wow.
my laptop won't allow a USB to be plugged in. So how do I initiate MFA? So there, that's kind of one of those exceptions to the rule until government, federal governments start coming around and saying, okay, we're going to have to allow, and open up at least, maybe registered FIDO keys are going to be allowed to be plugged into the USB ports if we're not going to allow phones to go on site and things like that,
I'm curious. I know you mentioned it, Dwayne, too. Is there there was something about smart card, right? There's like smart card and certificate.
Yeah, you got the RSA cards. I worked with a guy who worked for the military. He was a guardsman, and he was IT in the military, and he carried around one of those RSA cards that had a rotating code every 5 minutes or whatever. So that's what I mean, and that was 10 years ago. They were using that for MFA, when before anybody else was using MFA, really.
Hell,
But again,
I think I can have one of those.
If that card gets stolen, you gotta really keep track of that card.
Well, that's the toughest thing too. I think an org has gone through same deal. It's like, okay, here's a token. We went to soft tokens. We hop back and forth. It's like you can lose it, sure. I think phones, people are a little more resilient to keep them. You might lose it, but still, it's like I think it's a little more detrimental. It's like, I lost this token or whatever. Can you just spend the extra $50 and get me a new one? It's like, no. Take care of it. Protect it with your life.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, so one of the other things you mentioned, back to like 365 and all these awesome like security features. The one thing, and Abdul's going to start smiling because he knows I work in legal and I'm going to ask a privacy question, but that's where we're going. What are your thoughts on like how privacy is really handled, or does Microsoft do a pretty decent job of handling that? Like if I, something that recently came across my desk is like the predictive text. So you're working in Word and you're typing along, and we've looked at GitHub Copilot and all this other stuff. Folks utilizing that, going out into machine learning environment and kind of coming back with some stuff. But what are your thoughts surrounding how privacy is really being handled there? We promise we won't tell anybody.
I mean, there's a lot more. There's a lot of capabilities, I think, that around and the thing around privacy and the privacy is one of those things that's only as good as and it kind of the same thing as AI and machine learning. It's only as good as the person that's really, or the people that are putting it in place.
Yeah.
Because you have to really label your data, your information as private for it to be recognized as private, to a certain degree. Yes, you can utilize, data loss protection and sensitivity labels and things will recognize things like social security numbers and credit cards and, driver's licenses from various countries and those type of things. But other, when it comes to like sensitive documents and things like that, you really have to kind of like let them know that, hey, you got to recognize this string as an invoice or, as a balance sheet or, so it's, again, it's the planning and understanding and knowing what data you have and what data you're handling is really as good, it's as good as you want, as good as you make it to a degree. The capabilities are there. within Microsoft, and within Purview, and those Purview capabilities for governance all has that, and even protect. There's a lot of capabilities that I've learned just in teaching classes around what you can do within Purview for even recognizing like harassment and and sensitive language and things like that are going to cause you reputational damage, not just privacy concerns and like that. Being able to tag that stuff, like, so that people aren't like harassing people in Teams channels and all of those things are all like really, really cool features that Microsoft has that might keep, not only not protect you financially from somebody's identity being stolen and somebody using their credit cards, but from you getting sued for for harassment or other or racism or whatever. It recognize you can tag those types of discussions and track those back to people. Insider risk management, and even Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. You can tag applications to not allow downloads and prints and things like that. So people, and if if somebody is, you got a disgruntled employee that all of a sudden starts printing off or downloading customer records, it can flag that immediately, and you can track those people down. So so those are all things that help manage risk and help manage manage privacy to a degree as well.
Awesome, great answer. Thank you. Abdul, you're up for hard questions now.
I already asked my hard questions, so. But the other thing I want to also talk about, you talk about the Cloud Defender. I think the other challenge that Microsoft is having is keeping up with the same name. So, started with Office 365, then it became Microsoft 365, and now all these, defenders for cloud. And so I think that's another challenge where customers get lost because they thought, I was doing the same product as before, and it's not the same. So what are your comments on that, and what have you seen?
Yeah, hopefully they settle down this year at Ignite and don't make any big name change announcements, right? Yeah, cross your fingers. I think to be honest, it's annoying when it happens, but when you start thinking about back when they back, what was it, in the spring, that's when they started to bring the Defender in, right? Started bringing Defender in, but they didn't bring Defender. They didn't bring cloud apps into Defender. They still called it Microsoft Cloud App Security, right? They did, so it was like, why didn't they rename that when they renamed everything else Defender? They waited on that and Security Center until the fall. They could have just renamed them all, and rather than naming them twice, doing renames twice in a year for that overarching security product, right? They did a better thing though with Purview, was they kind of just did that at one time, right? They had that preview. They had Purview as a preview kind of thing for a while, and then they decided, okay, everything that goes into governance is going to be called Purview. All right, okay, and then most recently they finally they haven't completely given up on Active Directory with Azure Active Directory, but they did rebrand the identity to Entra, right? So maybe eventually we won't have to have that discussion of why Azure Active Directory is different than Active Directory, and why Microsoft had to hold on to that name when they created a cloud identity provider. So hopefully that'll take place here, and they kind of phase that Azure Active Directory out of it, and maybe just have Entra as the identity platform. But we'll see on that. But yeah, it is, hopefully they settle down on it. Like I said, I think they've got it they've done a good job of kind of packaging, getting everything in a nice package. They just probably should have done it a little bit. I'm one that has like kind of the rip the Band-Aid approach. Go ahead and just do it instead of kind of doing it in phases. Just get it all out of the way and let everybody complain about it, and make fun on social media as it goes, and about different, just putting Defender in front of it or Purview or whatever, but just be done with it. It'll settle down, and then everybody will adapt and adopt, and be all good.
And where do you see Microsoft going with security in the next 12 to 18 months? I think that's going to be the real focus.
I think that's going to be a big. I think around every one of the hyperscalers, it's a big focus, and you've got the other two hyperscalers trying to catch up really to Microsoft to a degree, because of what Microsoft already had in Microsoft 365 and all of that. You're seeing Google purchased that company Simplify as a SOAR solution. They purchased Chronicle, to really have what Microsoft already had with Microsoft Sentinel and with Defender. So, and AWS is there. AWS touts they're the first and they're the biggest hyperscaler, but they're probably lagging behind even Google when it comes to inherent security capabilities. When I look, like I was saying at the beginning, I'm working on my AWS security. When they talk about intrusion detection and protection, they talk about going to the AWS marketplace and spinning up a EC2 instance with Trend Micro on it. That's their solution for ITS and IPS. So they've got work that they've got to do to get themselves to that area. Now, they don't, AWS themselves aren't like Microsoft or Google, because they don't have those business productivity packages like those two do. They have Chime for video conferencing, but they don't have the Google Suite, or they don't have Office 365. So it's not as inherent to day-to-day user interaction as Microsoft and Google are as either. So, just to, stick up for them a little bit, not to bash them completely from a security perspective, but, there is going to be a focus. So Microsoft's got to continue to kind of push forward as they have been, or everybody's going to, they're going to catch up, I talk to people, like I said, I work for a company that does a lot with AWS. And when I talk to security engineers within my own company, they, even though we lean towards AWS a lot for infrastructure, from an infrastructure perspective, from a security perspective, anybody that knows anything about security in the cloud knows that Microsoft is really the leader there.
Awesome. Of course, I'm thinking back. I know you nailed it with Microsoft Sentinel, because I think some folks still struggle, and I'm curious how many folks actually made a living off of like renaming resources from one to the other when it got rebranded. I was thinking about that one night. I'm like, man, that's a good chunk of change. I mean, but anyways, no.
I have no room to complain. I have no room to really point fingers, because my company is in the process of a rebranding ourselves. So
that's got to be fun.
My company's actually split it. I was working for CloudReach. We got purchased by Atos, and Atos announced late June that we're going to be spinning off our company. The cloud and security and big data portion of our company is actually going to be a different name and a completely different company.
Oh, wow.
And the data center part of the company is going to stay Atos and be like the foundation, and keep the data centers and keep the lights on the data centers while the rest of us do cloud native stuff. So,
wow,
which is interesting. So yeah, again, we're confusing the market. We're confusing the market on our own anyway. So
yeah. So
you can't beat them, join them with the name changes.
Exactly right. Well, Dwayne, this has been fantastic. Seriously, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time, for your info share. I'd say, I guess my one last question: if there was one thing that you really want to make sure that stuck with folks from this session, what would it be?
Do your research, do your due diligence when you're assessing, the tools that you need for security, compliance and identity, risk assessments and all that. Like I said already, plan and communicate. It's all about planning. It's all about communicating. It's all about doing everything up front that you need so that you don't fall. You don't leave yourself vulnerable in any way, as well as you understand what you're making your investment in. Like Abdul said, a lot of people are buying Microsoft 365 and don't know what they even have. Research that. Look and see, every piece that comes with an E5 license and say, is this something something that's important to me, especially if you're a company that does business, it has any kind of regulations on you or does business with any company that has regulatory compliance or you deal with countries that have any kind of GDPR or anything like that. Keep that in mind. Who are you going to do business with too? And if you make a small investment up front, you're not making a big investment later and creating any kind of upheaval in your organization.
Awesome. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you for your time again. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time, another month from now. So take care, everyone.
All right, thank you both.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a great
Dwayne.
day.